Wheel of Genre, the show for readers who think Little Shop of Horrors didn't go far enough. Right now we are reading every short story in Jeff and Ann VanderMeer's The Weird Anthology, including this one, Luigi Ugolini's The Vegetable Man. I'm Zach, and this week I'm really interested in just kind of the fact that this was translated for the first time for this story, these kind of like little gems that have been plucked out of history that we are just getting to enjoy in English right now. I think that's so cool. That's one of the strengths of this anthology.
It's very cool how many pieces they had translated in this. I'm Bob. I'm interested in the nature of this story being kind of like a classic campfire horror story. I don't know if you ever were ever told the story of the Claw, Zach. Do you know the Claw?
No, I don't know the Claw.
You just make up whatever stupid story you want, and then eventually it has to be around a fire where it's very dark, and you got the what's that called? Flashlight.
Oh yeah,
it looks very sexual. I'm sorry. Look, a flashlight right
here. I thought
here.
it was a microphone you were holding.
Oh, okay.
I was like, really, in the woods?
A microphone in the woods. So you have the flashlight right here. You're looking real scary, and you tell some stupid story, and then finally you just say, and then he got him with the claw, and then you do that, and then it scares everybody. This story is just like the Claw, only it's with vegetables, which are even scarier than like that. This is really fun though, because we have a botanist goes into the jungles of Brazil, and he's saying, look, I'm going to find the things no one else has ever found. Why are these people not going out there? I am going to go the extra mile and find these things. And then he finds something just terrifying, and he brings it back.
He finds a new plant, but I guess the plant bites him in a weird way. Its thorns get into him. Yeah. So I think I'll stop right there because, the long and short of it is he himself is turning into the plant. But I'm noticing a pattern here now, actually, last three stories, and maybe this is indicative of us entering the 20th century in this anthology. But we've got, so between Hans Heinz Ewer's The Spider and Rabindranath Tagore's The Hungry Stones, and now this one, The Vegetable Man, we kind of have this sense in which it's a flipping of the food chain. The human, the predator, if you will, has become the prey. All three stories kind of have someone being preyed upon or seduced by something, whether that's a kind of spider woman or these kind of seductive fantasy women who kind of turn into a snake at some point and start wrapping itself around you, or this one where, I think of a vegetable as probably one of the more harmless things in this world, but this thing kind of bites him, kind of drips 2 drops of green venom into him and creates a metamorphosis in his body.
This reminds me of Annihilation too, because in there we have people getting infected by plants. Of course, they transform in different ways. In this, he goes in there and he kind of gets what he wants. It's similar to the spider too, because this obsession, this kind of devotion to this other person becomes what he wants. He wants only her, and it turns out she's a spider who wants to kill him. But in this, he wants to find the plant that no one else has ever found, and he's going to risk anything for it. When he gets out there, he sees what his fate is going to look like. He gets, it doesn't really click with him, but he sees what will happen to him. He sees this like plant man. What does he say? He says, the appearance of this unique specimen is the following. It was a shrub as tall as a normal man with palmate leaves that were thick and fleshy. Its branches had a reddish meat color to them that almost filled me with a feeling of disgust. They seemed like human limbs without skin. So he sees this and he could say, oh my God, if I get any closer, I could be just like this. But he says, no, I will be the one who will be recognized as the plant guy. And he really gets what he asked for.
So, first off, I'll say, I think that the descriptive writing here is top-notch, specifically in this paragraph. And perhaps I would say top-notch only in this paragraph. But the comparison of a plant as being like a person with their skin flayed off is crazy work. I love that. That is That is awesome. That is awesome. Horroring, I guess we'll call it. Awesome weirding out. But what I really want to ask you is, I personally didn't view this as symbolic of anything, but when you kind of presented it like that, you presented it as a kind of hubristic tale. He looked at the planet and he's like, oh, this is my chance to make a name for myself. And then he reaches out and he really made a name now. He became the plant guy. So, I mean, do you feel like this is supposed to be read as symbolic or as an allegory, or at the heart of it, do you feel like it's just body horror?
I think probably at the heart of it, it's just body horror. But again, it's got that campfire tale of, I'm going to tell you something scary. And at the end, this guy who's telling me all about these plants, he takes off his gloves and he shows me he's got leaves for hands. That would definitely freak me out a little bit. But I think it is body horror. However, Luigi is very interesting. I was going to say Luigi Ugolini. Luigi Ugolini. He is really interesting. And he was writing all of these almost like Italian primers for middle school and elementary school students. And a lot of his writing is like required reading, or at least it was for decades. He wrote tons and tons and tons of these articles, and he also wrote all of these biographies. I wonder if that is seeping into this horror and if it's coloring this version of weird fiction, where it is kind of a tale, a cautionary tale, where someone is not just narrating a cautionary tale, but the character inside of it is narrating it to you, and then he shows you the result of what happened to him for being hubristic. I wonder if that might be informing Ugolini's weird fiction here.
I think that's a fair assessment. I think that, yeah, and maybe the story wouldn't. Maybe a story like this needs, formally speaking, a kind of like through line, like that, a kind of thematic through line. I had fun reading an interview with the translators, Brendan and Anna Connell, who were doing a lot of translation work from Italian into English. And, they had a lot to say actually about their thoughts on weird fiction. And they said something really interesting to me, which I think kind of captures my somewhat ambivalent response on this story. And before I say what they said, I want to say I don't want to say I was struggling with this story. It didn't hit the same way as a lot of the previous stories we've read. Some of the previous stories have been truly haunting and unsettling, and this to me felt maybe more like a cheap 1950s horror film. You know what I mean? Something you can go to the drive-in for. And I was kind of like struggling with that kind of initial feeling. The interviewer asked them what makes good weird fiction versus bad weird fiction. And the translator said that weird fiction fails when it relies on cliche images. So it's not going to feel weird if it's a vampire or Frankenstein or, any of these kind of like classic images of the weird or the horrific. But weird fiction works when it's something that really comes from like the author's personal, subjective, imaginative contents, whatever weird idiosyncratic thing is lurking in their brain. And I think that part of the problem with this for me isn't anything to do with the story itself. It has to do with where we are as media consumers in 2025. We're familiar with plant human images. It's no longer, it's creepy,
The green giant.
Sure.
Of peas.
It's horrific, but it doesn't have that same edge that maybe it would have had at the time this was published.
I would agree. I think it's cute. I love vegetables and vegetable horror. I think it does come back to weird fiction, though, of that. Look, are you really up for this? Are you ready for this tale? Are you going to be terrified by it? There's an interesting part where he is telling the guy who's coming to see him, this vegetable man is, telling the narrator all of what's happening. And then finally he says, "You seem surprised by all of this, but you are still ignorant of the most terrible part of my awful existence." Now here is where I think it's weird fiction, because it is coming close to this obsession, this need to know. You can't escape wanting to know. And he says, "But tell me, would you like to know everything?" The narrator says, he's thinking about it. He says, "Do you feel strong and fearless enough to endure the sight of something truly terrible?" And he finally agrees. And he says, "Take off my gloves, Alfonso." He shows the leaves, but it's a great ending, I think. But yeah, I think it's a cute weird horror. I don't think it's unsettling.
I did think that the detail of the eyes on the leaves and how much time he spent talking about the kind of hateful stare of those eyes was really good. And, you already mentioned Jeff VanderMeer's Annihilation tetralogy. And if there's one kind of rhyming moment in that, it's this idea that of how if people are transforming into other things, if a metamorphosis occurs, there's still this echo of the original person. So, and eyes is one huge thing that we saw throughout the Annihilation series, the eyes of different animals. You could clearly identify who it was according to the eyes. But also, in the Annihilation series, you had the people who turned into hedges, or at least it was strongly implied that these hedges that were kind of sitting, these people-shaped hedges that were sitting around the living room, seemed to still be in motion, seemed to still be in the middle of talking with each other, just frozen in time. And, compare that to what we have here, where, now looking back at this original plant, you do have to wonder if it was a person at one point. Are all of these plants being seeded by taking on a human host first, or do they grow naturally by themselves? And if that's the case, was what the narrator of the story within the story was looking at, was that a person out there? But we don't have those hints of any kind of movement or any kind of activity, any kind of, animalian activity, except for the way that he personifies the hateful stare of the eyes in the leaves as a premonition of what's to come for him. I thought that was good.
To be trapped forever in the leaf.
Yeah.
Yes, the hateful stare. Ugolini was really interesting. I want to talk a little bit about his history. He was a lawyer for, I think, almost a full decade, and then just decided, look, I want to start writing. And so he is published in the Italian new anthology by Giovanni Papini, who Borges loved, and called him an undeservedly forgotten author. But Ugolini starts writing all of these weird fiction tales, these horror stories, and then he starts writing, like we said earlier, the children's literature, especially stuff that's like in the Italian primers, Baby's First Story. He was writing stuff like that too. But he also has interesting family members. His granddaughter, who is also his goddaughter, who he helped named, she invented something. Her name is Vanna Marie Bonta, I should say. She invented something called the two-suit. Have you heard of this?
No.
Here you go. I'm just going to quote Wikipedia because there is no reason to change this incredible couple of sentences. The two-suit, a flight garment designed to facilitate sex in microgravity environments of outer space. The spacesuit was featured on the Universe television series, which followed Bonta into zero gravity to film an episode titled Sex in Space, that aired in 2009 on the History Channel. That was interesting. And then I thought this was amazing and very cool. When he died, not that he died was cool, but what he said was, una pagina bianca. This is the last thing he said, and it means a white page, or like a blank page. So as he's dying, he's thinking of the afterlife as just another blank page.
Wow. That is beautiful and inspiring. And by inspiring, I mean,
or no,
I mean, it's inspiring me to come up with a really cool final word, really cool final phrase to drop on my deathbed. If I pre-plan it, and I know the moment's gonna happen, I think I can let it go and then just let it ripple throughout history like that. That's good.
Bianca. Yeah. He was also a anti-fascist, and this was really interesting because he's thrown in jail. All of his essays were found because he was writing essays in secret against Benito Mussolini, and then Mussolini came and found him. So he was a political prisoner for a long time. They didn't kill him. He was lucky to stay alive. But anyway, he was really cool, Ugolini.
Well, I wonder how much more of his work has been translated in English. He's an author who I think he deserves to be checked out again, see what else he's
For sure.
done. Well, onward. Talk to you later, Bob.
Talk to you later. Oh no, it's the claws!